Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my June wrap-up. Halfway through the year, can we believe it? June is over, we're moving into July. I'm filming this pretty late, yes I know, I have a job now, don't even talk to me about this. In June I read 29 books, so less than last month and the month before that, but that's still a good amount. I'm gonna be happy with that. I read 9,448 pages and my average rating was a 3.52. That's not very good. But I did have some really highly rated reads this month. I had a 5-star, a 4.5 star, a couple of 4.25, so there were just a couple books that I rated pretty lowly that dragged that rating down. I read 86% fiction and 14% nonfiction, and then my top genres were fantasy, LGBTQIA, literary, classics, and sci-fi, and this is the closest I've ever gotten in a month to fantasy not being the top genre. Like normally it's the top genre by far, but I read 10 fantasy books this month and 8 LGBTQ and classic and literary books this month. So normally it's like 2/3 fantasy and then everything else. We're breaking that down a little bit this month. It was just halfway through the month, like I just started to realize that the fantasy I was picking up was not hitting for me. I needed to like go back to the drawing board and wait until like I saw something that really grabbed my attention before trying to read it again, because I was just picking up stuff, I think probably for challenges and stuff, just like not really, that I knew I probably wasn't gonna like, and then I ended up not liking it. Like what a surprise. And then 86% of the books I read were in print and 14% were digital. I was really also trying to get through some of the books that I own this month, trying to get stuff on the shelves and break down, you know, try to get some of the books that I had just stacked up here waiting forever to be read. So let's go through what I actually read this month, the books that I would like to talk to you about. Firstly, I think I mentioned this one at the end of my May wrap-up, The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. This is the same author who wrote Between Two Fires, which I read last month and loved, gave like a 4.5. I really loved that book. Might be one of my favorite books I've read so far this year, and so I was really excited to read some of his other stuff. And I picked up The Black Tongue Thief, and unfortunately I just really didn't like this book. I gave this book like a 2.5, and I can't necessarily even say that it's a bad book. Like I don't think it's a bad book, and I think that everything I disliked about it was purposeful. Like it's purposefully being a very comedic, grim, dark, funny book, and that's just not my genre at all. I don't like grimdark and I don't like comedic fantasy, and so I really don't like both of those genres stuck together. I just really hated the narrative voice of this book. I found it very grating. I didn't find him very funny. I really didn't like that the book focused way more on the romantic sort of manic pixie dream girl like love interest with him and this other witch lady, instead of like the actually potentially very interesting platonic relationship between the main character and Galva. Like that's the relationship that's mentioned on the like flap of on the summary of the book, that he is going to befriend this lady named Galva and they're gonna go on an adventure together. Their relationship is a really minor part of this book, and it never really convinced me that they were friends or that they had like grown to really like platonically love each other. And she is such a cool character that I just wanted the book to be about her, so I did put on hold The Daughter's War, which is a prequel about her, and I think I might like that one a little bit more if it's not the same like sort of jokey, funny, very self-aware, quippy writing style, and if it's about her, a character I find a lot more compelling. You're always gonna get me with like a lesbian like lady who worships death. Like I'm just so into that. But we'll see how much I actually do like that one. But anyways, again, this one, it was a couple different things. Again, the writing style I just really didn't like. I really didn't like that romance. I literally thought about DNFing this book every single chapter, and yet every single chapter I kept reading. So like I can't really say that it's a bad book, or that I don't think Christopher Buehlman is a talented writer, because I did really enjoy the world building. I thought it was so interesting. I did think sometimes it had a tendency to info dump, but like even in those info dumps I was more engaged than I was during like the actual like normal storytelling. And I did think the plot like really kept it moving. Like I do think that it was a very like just, you're kind of along for the ride. There's never really a dull moment, so every time I was like, this is boring, I'm gonna DNF it, like something would happen that I'd be like, oh, but I'm actually kind of interested to see how they get out of this situation. So I did finish it, I did think it was interesting. I did like the plot. I did like the world building. I did, again, like the idea of some of the characters, but I just really couldn't stand that main character and the writing style and the sense of humor of this book. So I did give it 2.5, but again, I can't really say that it's a bad book. It's just a book that's so categorically not for me and that I didn't enjoy, but I can see a lot of people liking this book. If you like, you know, again, if you like comedic grimdark, that's like a subgenre, then you will really enjoy this. But it was just so different from Between Two Fires in all of the worst ways for me personally. I also read Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. A friend lent this to me because I really actually loved Intermezzo. That's the only Sally Rooney book I had read before. I loved Intermezzo, but I was kind of, bless you, my cat just sneezed. I was kind of so hesitant to pick up anything else from her because just like her most popular stuff, Normal People, Beautiful World, Where Are You, like they just didn't seem up my alley. If you've watched more than one of my videos, you probably know I don't really like straight people. I don't like reading about them. I don't like reading about their romances, and that's always kind of what Sally Rooney I feel like is pitched as. Like she writes love stories, like that's what people kind of, she's like a lit ficky writer, but she deeply writes about like people's relationships. And so I was just, I even went on and bought another book from her after I read Intermezzo and loved it so much, but I was just really hesitant to actually read it and pick it up because I loved Intermezzo so much and I didn't want to be like, well, you know, that's the only one I like from her, nothing else is going to compare. But a friend of mine whose taste I trust and who knows my taste really well lent this one to me. She was like, I think you will really like this one, please pick it up. So I did, and yes, I actually really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it like a 4.25. It definitely feels like almost a rough draft of Intermezzo. It's kind of similar in that it deals with this like bisexual main character who is living with her ex-girlfriend, and they have this really interesting, complicated relationship, and they both sort of get involved in the lives of this older, glamorous married couple, and it's sort of all about that dynamic between honestly the four of them. But that was my one kind of problem with this book, that it didn't go far enough for me. It didn't really commit to like the weirdness of like this four-way relationship that I think could have been really interesting. It kind of pulled back to a safer place of Francis and, oh god, what's his name? Francis and Nick at the end. Like there's a hint that there could be like a weird throuple or even foursome situation going on there, and that like the relationship between Francis and Bobby is like always going to be like a really big part of her life, but it didn't commit as much as I wanted it to. And that's, I think, where you can really see that she took this book and then I think just made it stronger and more explicit in Intermezzo, where you do have that like explicit throuple negotiation and like people dealing with the fact that they're in a throuple and they're going to have to deal with like the social ramifications of that. Whereas this book, I felt like I could have used like 50 or even 100 more pages to really like explore all four of those characters like engaging in something together and like again building this weird little non-normative relationship. But ultimately I really enjoyed this. Again, it's both of, I view Sally Rooney as like a heterosexual romance writer, but both of the books I picked up from her and really loved have been queer and have featured, again, just really interesting discussions of class and whether like non-monogamous love is possible, and if it is, what does it look like? Do we love people the same way? Is it ever possible to love and be loved in exactly the same way by other people? Like, I just really enjoyed this one, and I do really want to pick up more from Sally Rooney now. I also read an arc this month called A Wall Is Also a Road by Annalee Newitz. I really didn't like the other Annalee Newitz book I read, Automatic Noodle, but I thought that this one, I accepted this arc because I thought that maybe in a full-length novel, those problems that I had in a novella would not be present, because I think mostly my problem with Automatic Noodle was, first of all, I'm just not that interested in like cozy stories, especially stories about like setting up a small business, but also I just felt like there was no real overarching plot or conflict. It felt more like sort of a series of vignettes or like short stories where a problem either interpersonal or plot-wise would crop up in one chapter and then immediately be solved in like the exact same chapter or even like right in the next chapter. So I thought that maybe those problems wouldn't be present in a full-length novel, because obviously there's different expectations for a full-length novel. It's meant to have like an overarching plot. So maybe there wouldn't be that problem. Unfortunately, I really didn't like this one either. This is kind of just confirmed that Annalee Newitz is just not an author for me. But whereas with the Christopher Buehlman book, I was like, this isn't a bad book, I just don't like it. I do kind of think this book is objectively not very well written. I just really didn't like the writing style in this one in a way that was not just like my personal preference. Like, it just was a very bland, stilted, flat writing style. Like, if there was not slime sex in this would be like a middle grade book, because just the way that the writing was written and the themes that were being conveyed and how they were being conveyed was so juvenile and just so simplistic that I really felt like I was reading a book for kids. And like, honestly, I think Annalee Newitz could write really good like YA or middle grade fiction, because just the themes I don't have a problem with, and like the imagination is there. It's just the way that those themes are developed and delivered never felt on an adult level to me. And I guess you could try to say that like the writing style is the way that it is because it's like about single-celled slime organisms. So like Annalee Newitz is trying to make them feel non-human and like not really like on a human level of sentience, but they like have grad school. Like, they're meant to be like sentient to a degree that is surpassing humans. They have better science than humans. And it's not just the slime characters that speak and narrate like this. It's also the human characters. They just swear more, which everyone knows is also a pet peeve of mine. When you are trying to make characters seem cool and you just have them swear a bunch, it's like, okay, whatever. I also swear a bunch. Doesn't make me cool. I'm probably the most uncool person around. But I really just had a problem with the writing style and with the simplicity of the themes. Like, it's kind of trying to be a book like Catabasis or The Practice, The Horizon, and The Chain, where it's about academia and like sort of exploring the dark side of academia and critiquing academia, but it never quite gets there on a structural level. Like, they just have a really mean professor that they're able to deal with through like the proper official university channels, and then the only thing wrong with the university system from this book's point of view is that they are using their research to sell and develop weapons. So all the students just leave and start an exact copy of their university. They just don't sell weapons. And so it's like there's no actual investigation into the structure of like a university graduate school setting and the ways in which that setting has been impacted by things like capitalism and colonialism and like, again, the scientific racism. Like, there's just no exploration into any of that. It's just selling weapons is bad. And it's like, yeah, but like that's not the only reason why we critique academia. Like, that's just not, again, it just didn't work on a structural level at all for me. And that's why I felt like, again, this could have been really good as a book for a younger audience, because then it doesn't really have the expectations that it will get into all that nitty-gritty stuff. You can just have this theme where it's like having a mean professor and selling weapons is bad, but I was just expecting a little bit more from this book, because again, I have read other sci-fi fantasy books that deal with that concept in such a nuanced and such an interesting, well-developed way. Again, I also had the same problem in this book as I did with Automatic Noodle, where conflicts and interpersonal and plot conflicts would be introduced in one chapter and then immediately resolved in another chapter. It just didn't really feel like there was ever a super strong overarching plot. Like, there would be a conflict or a crisis and you'd be like, oh my god, how are they gonna get out of this situation? And then you would turn the page and like almost everything would have been solved off page or like in the first paragraph of the next chapter, and that's just not very exciting for me to read about. I did think that the best part of the story was the way that ancient Pompeii is described and displayed. You can definitely tell from the book and also from Annalee Newitz's like author's note that they really wanted to show Pompeii from the perspective not of like the great conquerors and war heroes, but from the perspective of like the ordinary everyday people who lived there. And I did think that that was interesting and was a unique perspective and was successful for the most part. I still wasn't entirely pleased with how that portion of the book played out, because a lot of it is okay, this single slime cell organism going to Pompeii and like studying humans and stuff, and they meet this friend who they become romantically and sexually involved with, and a lot of other characters try to bring up the potential like ethical complications of that, but it's always treated as they're in the wrong and Garden Path is in the right. But anyways, Myrtis, the human, is like telling Garden Path all this stuff about humans and what they're like, and obviously it's from her perspective of being like an enslaved person, an enslaved woman in Roman Pompeii. So like it's obviously a very biased perspective, and Myrtis like just tells her all this stuff because it's so normal to her. Like it's just this very neutral presentation of Roman society, and Garden Path just takes it all at face value. There's really never any conflict between the two characters as Garden Path is maybe being like, that's kind of fucked up though, like why do you guys do that, or like, you know, is that the case for all humans? Like, Garden Path never tries to go anywhere else and study the humans in different places, which you'd think would be a scientist's like first priority. But anyways, Garden Path isn't an anthropologist. They're like a biologists, so they're just studying like the food webs in Pompeii, but still it's like you don't want to go anywhere else and like double check all this information that Murtis is telling you. But that was a big problem for me, especially in the sense that slavery is a big part of this book. It was a big part of Roman Pompeii culture, and while obviously it's portrayed as like a bad thing in this book, again, Murtis presents it as a very neutral system that just is a fact of their everyday lives, and Garden Path never argues with that or tries to make her see that it's wrong. In fact, when Murtis is freed, she buys 2 more slaves of her own, and that's never a conflict between her and Garden Path. Like, I felt like that could have been a really good point for Garden Path to be like, but you were treated so badly as a slave and now you're purchasing other people. And Italy knew it's, again, in the author's note, it's like, this book is for all the enslaved and the people who were conquered, and it's not for, you know, the people who are doing the enslaving. But yet is in that same author's note like defensive about Roman slavery, and it's like, you know, it was actually not as bad as chattel slavery because oftentimes it was very normal for like an enslaved person to be freed by their master. And it's like, okay, like it's not as bad, but like that doesn't mean it's good. Like, it doesn't mean we shouldn't question that system and the way that it functions and have characters having conflicts about the system and their belief in it. Like, I don't know, it was just a very weird tack to take this, where you're like clearly aware that it's a problem that you need to condemn it, but also like not even the fact that it's like, oh, it was just a fact of their lives, so let's treat it like a normal thing. But you have this character who's coming in from the outside and who is positioned in a place where they could question and they could have doubts and they could change the characters who live there's mind, and they just don't at all. It was such a missed opportunity to me, and it meant that, again, that part of the book that I could have really liked, the sort of exploration of Pompeii culture and like the lives of the people who lived there and how the slime interacts with the people there, I also didn't like. Overall, this just really confirmed that Annalie Notes is not an author for me. I am very grateful to have received an arc of it. I think if you like stuff along the lines of like Becky Chambers, if you liked Automatic Noodle, I think you will like this. I just didn't really like it, and again, I can't really say that it's just because it's not for me. Like, I think part of that is it's just not for me. It's kind of a cozy sci-fi story, which is not really my thing, but then also I did have all of those, like, in my opinion, pretty objective, valid critiques of the narrative structure and of the way the themes were delivered. So didn't really enjoy this one. I also read It Lasts Forever, Then It's Over by Anne DeMarkin. This is, I'm pretty sure this won the Ursula K. Le Guin Prize for Fiction 2 years ago, because last year was Rakesfall, and then I think the year before that was It Lasts Forever, Then It's Over, and then I think the year before that was Arbor Reality, or it was nominated for it. I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, I finally picked this one up. This is a weird little zombie story. It's like a zombie apocalypse story from the perspective of a zombie, but they're not really typical zombies. They still like speak and they still can move around. They just have hunger for human flesh, and they are kind of all stuck. They don't remember anything about their human life, so they're all just kind of stuck going through the motions and then occasionally eating people, and sometimes their body parts will like fall off. And it's from the perspective of this narrator who her body is like physically falling apart, and she's going on this journey to try to sort of reconnect with the faint memories that she has of like this previous partner that she had in this grieving. And really the whole thing is like an allegory for grief and acceptance. And I enjoyed this. I enjoyed the weirdness of it and the kind of uniqueness of it, but I just wasn't as emotionally impacted as I wanted to be by this book going into it, especially because it's this like, it is a book about grief. It's not really a book about zombies at all, but I just didn't really connect to it emotionally. It felt very similar both in vibes and in like themes to The Blue Book of Nebo by something Ross, I don't remember their full name, which I read last month and really enjoyed, and I did feel very emotionally connected to that one. And they're very similar books in that they're very short. They're these kind of non-traditional post-apocalyptic books, and I was really emotionally connected to Blue Book of Nebo, and I wasn't really connected to It Lasts Forever, Then It's Over. So that's just so interesting to me that one did work for me and one didn't, but I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure, maybe if it just wasn't the right time for me to read this book, or if something about the prose, or maybe it was the fact that I was reading it on my phone, but I also read Blue Book of Nebo on my phone on Libby, so I'm just not entirely sure what it was that didn't hit for me about this one, but it was nonetheless very interesting and unique. I also read The Plague by Albert Camus finally. I've had this one for several library book sales, and I really enjoyed this. I really liked the beginning. The middle dragged a little bit for me, but then the ending was so good. Like the last probably like 100 pages I just really loved, and so that, you know, shot it back up to a 4.25 for me. I really liked this one. It is about a plague. This town in, I think, France or Algeria, which there is an outbreak of like the bubonic plague. The town is shut down and quarantined, and it's about a plague, yes, but it's really more about love and about isolation. The plague is not just scary because it, you know, impacts you with boils and kills you. It's scary because it cuts you off from the people you love. It forces you to quarantine and isolate, and the whole town is, some of the people in the town are visitors from other places, so they have loved ones outside of the town that they can no longer see. And a lot of the book is about the connections that people are trying to get back to, the connections that they make within the town as they're under quarantine, the kind of struggle to continue to value human life when people are dying all around you. Again, the middle dragged for me a little bit, but the ending, when the town is sort of starting to finally recover and the plague is finally being controlled, but yet all this terrible stuff is still happening, that really got me. I really loved it. There is a relationship between the narrator and between a character in this book, and the love between them I just thought was so beautiful and tragic. And then also the love between the narrator and his mom I also thought was really, really impactful. So I definitely do recommend this one, but it is very dark, and if you have like pandemic related trauma, I probably would not pick this one up. I did see a lot of people in the Storygraph reviews being like, I shouldn't have picked this up during a pandemic, so I'm glad I waited to pick it up a little bit after a pandemic. I also read the first 2 books in the Valdemar series by Mercedes Lackey. These are the first 2 that were ever published, the first series that was published. The subseries is called like Heralds of Valdemar, Arrows of the Queen and Arrow's Flight. The only other Mercedes Lackey I've read is The Last Herald Mage, which is like the 3rd or 4th, I think, sub-series in this larger series, and I read it because I was interested in seeing what was, to my knowledge at the time, like the first gay male protagonist in fantasy. I think now it's probably actually Nivarian by Samuel Delany. I think that's probably actually before, but at the time, this was the oldest fantasy book I could find with a gay male protagonist, and that's why I read it. And I actually really enjoyed the first 2 books because I felt like they had a lot of interesting stuff to say about domestic abuse and like recovering from domestic abuse and parental abuse specifically. The last book was just crazy. Like the first 2 books, I felt like balanced like light and fluffy and depressing really well, and then the last one was just like a traumatic like sexual assault fest, and it was just very depressing, and I came away from being like, well, what the fuck. And that's something that Arrows of the Queen actually shed a little bit of light on. Like, I didn't realize before that Vaniel, the protagonist of The Last Herald Mage, is like a mythological, like a heroic figure that they know and they tell stories about in Talia's time. Like, Vaniel was set like 100 years in the future, 100 years in the past, where they still had a little bit of access to magic, and in Talia's time they don't. And like the very like first page of the book is Talia like having a daydream in which she was there with Vaniel and was able to save him from this tragic past instead of him, you know, dying horribly. So it's like that's kind of that was always a predetermined end of the story that was necessary. Now, did it have to have all of the on-page graphic sexual assault? No, that's not mentioned in this one, so don't know why she added that. But anyways, I did read the first 2 books in this. It's a very like wholesome YA series. Like, it definitely leans a little bit young, and it's definitely about like the Talia's coming of age story. She's raised in this sort of very abusive, conservative, fundamentalist like religion, and she is taken out of it when she becomes a herald and gets like, you know, a magic telepathic horse and all these friends, and it's very much about teaching people lessons about school and about friends and bullying, and like, you know, don't just suffer in silence, tell a trusted adult and get help, which I love. Like, just very wholesome messages. There is conflict and there is danger, but it's all solved in a very straightforwardly pretty happy manner. And it also has a very casual, very open attitude towards sex and sexuality. Like, some of Talia's best friends are like a married lesbian couple, and then Talia, like, something that I really love when YA fantasy does is it shows that you don't have to like be in love and like epic one true love with someone to be able to like be in a relationship or have sex with them. Like, Talia has casual like sex with her friends, people she loves and trusts, and that's like considered a very normal thing. They have a very normalized attitude towards birth control and like, you know, having sex with whoever you want. You don't have to be married to them, and it doesn't have to be your YA novel one true love. Like, it can just be a friend. And there is a dynamic in the first book where like it's this guy she kind of has a crush on, everybody assumes they're gonna get together, but they realize that when they try to like kiss and go further, that they're kind of just platonic friends. Like, they don't really want to go any further, even though they are attracted to each other. So they just agree to be platonic friends, and they become like this found family for each other, and I really loved that. I have held off on reading the third book in this series because when I was talking about how wholesome and slice of lifey I found the first two books and how I was having a really good time with them, somebody did warn me that the third book is a lot darker and to like check the trigger warnings for that. And of course I went and checked in trigger warning, graphic sexual assault. So I'm really scared of this one. I don't know why Mercedes Lackey likes to do this. I don't know why this is a problem with Mercedes Lackey, where like the first two books are, you know, have hardships, but the characters have like friends and a support system and are able to get it together, and there's nothing really too scary or dark. And then the last book is like on-page graphic sexual assault. It's like, what are you doing? Why? Anyways, I won't judge until I've actually read it. I'm like 15% of the way into it, and I keep putting it off again because I'm scared. Mercedes Lackey. But I did enjoy those first two books, and if you're looking for like a YA fantasy series led by like a strong female character with, again, those very open attitudes, I do recommend it. I also really liked Starless by Jacqueline Carey. I gave this book a 4.25. I've never read any other Jacqueline Carey. I think I just would have too hard of a time with like the like children being raised into being sex workers thing. Like, I'm just really hesitant to get into that. I just feel like I probably would not be able to take it, even though I'm sure it's a really well-written series, especially from what I've seen from this book. Like, I you know, she's proven herself to me. I just don't really think I would like reading about the other stuff. I really enjoyed Starless though. I think I said in my Storygraph review that it's like if Link and Zelda were in Elden Ring, and that's just like the vibes it gave me, the closest comparison I can have. It's not like a copy. It's not like Zelink fanfic in Elden Ring, but like it just is these two characters, a boy and a girl, who are like, one is a princess and one is her bodyguard, and they have been like soul bonded since they were children and have spent their entire lives like knowing that they're gonna be like this pair, and he's gonna have to protect her and she's gonna be like a magic princess. And then they live in this like really epic fantasy world that's kind of dark, and they just have to like deal with these immortal warring gods and factions that are just sort of a daily part of their average life. I just really enjoyed the world. I thought it was so interesting. It was a nice mix of like not really explaining anything, but then when something would become plot relevant, like the characters would like sit down and have a conversation about it. So it was a nice mix for me. I just really liked that world, and I really did like the main character Kai. There's also a really, in my opinion, nuanced look at gender in this book, at gender identity with the main character. I don't really want to spoil anything because I do think that part of the draw of this book is like seeing how that develops and seeing how that that part of Kai's character develops. So I'm not going to really say too much about it, just that I thought it was very nuanced and complicated and respectful, and I really liked the discussions about like internalized misogyny versus like genuinely not seeing yourself as a girl. It was just something that was very complicated and could so easily have tipped over into other side, into being like offensive and kind of, you know, not cool, but it just stayed very nuanced and respectful the entire time, and so I really enjoyed it. My kind of critique of this book, and the reason why I couldn't really give it any higher, is that the first 2/3 of the book are very, very character focused, and they're all about Kai and like his journey training, and then his journey going to the palace and meeting Zarya, the princess, and like, you know, getting to know her, and learning about himself and who he is and who he identifies as, and I really liked that. And then the last third is very plot focused, and it gets really into this like prophecy of how Kai and Zarya and these other people are like prophesized to like save the world from this evil god that is like waking up and rampaging. And this plot was interesting. Like, don't get me wrong, I was very interested by that plot line and how they were doing it and the ultimate ending of that, but I felt like we just lost a lot of that character focus, and it meant that some of the character and relationship developments that happened in that last third didn't entirely convince me. Like, I was just never convinced that Kai and Zarya's love was romantic. It just felt like it bordered that line for me perfectly in those first 2/3, and then suddenly in the end it's like, oh my god, I'm in love with her and I've always been in love with her. And it's like, since when though? And it was like every time they tried to sit down and have a conversation about their feelings for each other or like show each other physical affection, some plot thing would happen and would interrupt them, and they would have to obviously go do the important plot thing. It was like freaking High School Musical when Troy and Gabriella keep getting interrupted when they're trying to kiss. Like, so I couldn't really be invested in them as a romantic couple because I just wasn't given enough by the time that they were like, oh yeah, we're in love. So that never really hit for me, but again, I really did like that aspect of the gender, the world building, and then Zari, the princess, is also disabled, and that was a big discussion of the book and a big like theme of the book that I really, again, thought was done very respectfully. I really enjoyed Starless by Jacqueline Carey, and I really like, should I try the what is it called? The Kushiel's Legacy series. Should I try it? I just am really scared by it, guys, but I mean, the writing and the world building and the character development in this was just so good. Like, should I try it? I don't know. Vote now on your phone. I also read Snake Eater by T. Kingfisher, which is just like the most T. Kingfisher book to ever T. Kingfisher. I gave this book a 3. It was just all the stuff that I like and dislike about T. Kingfisher. It has really interesting characters and a really interesting like sort of low-key horror element, and there's a really great like set of characters and friendships that form by the end of the book, but I just could not stand the humor. It starts getting really humorous as the main character adjusts to her situation. It was just a setting and a plot setup that felt so familiar from all the other T. Kingfisher books I've read. Girl escaping abusive relationship with dog, flees to small town, creepy stuff happens. And there were 2 aspects of this book that I just really didn't like. I just was like bamboozled, baffled, flabbergasted by the fact that there's sort of like a woke priest in this book, and he's like a cool priest who doesn't have a problem with like all the other gods and spirits that like live in the real gods and real spirits that live in the desert, and he is like cool with them and like knows they exist and believes they exist, and is like, you know, God God just says not to have anything above him, so like it's fine that they exist and we can all coexist. And this priest is even a little bit magical himself. I won't spoil how. And he's Catholic. Like, literally any other denomination would make sense here. Protestant, fine. Baptist, fine. Like, anything else would be fine. Even like non-denominational Christian would be fine. But Catholic? Like, I'm sorry, but he would be excommunicated from the church if he was going around telling his parish that, yeah, gods exist and that's okay. Like, I'm sorry, like, Catholics just don't believe that. Catholics just don't act like that. I grew up Catholic, and like, that's just not how they work. That's just not how they work. They do what the Pope says, okay? Like, if the Pope is not gonna say that it's okay to worship like the desert spirits, like, the Catholic Church is in fact so famously intolerant that they had like an exorcism wing. Like, that is such a huge thing in fiction that like the Catholic Church did have exorcists, and like there's all, you know, the Exorcist, freaking like everything, like the fact that the idea that there's like this, you know, hidden wing of the Catholic Church that exists just to exorcise demons, like they would not be cool with this. A Catholic priest would not be cool with this. And that was just so, like, that was more immersion breaking and more unrealistic than literally any other part of the book to me. And again, I just don't understand why T. Kingfisher made this character Catholic, because it just is so unrealistic to a degree that like it again like broke my immersion. And every time this character came on page and was like doing his thing, he's a great character and I really liked him, but I couldn't stop being like, you are not Catholic, buddy. There's also a transgender character in this book, a trans woman character, and she is awesome and very cool, but I didn't love the circumstances of like her being revealed as trans to the main character, Selena. I just hate when like a character being trans is treated as like a reveal and the focus is on like how this character like is responding to that. And obviously like Selena responds well and is like respectful, but she also kind of freaks out because she's coded as like neuroatypical and like she just doesn't really know how to respond, and it's like, oh god, I hope I haven't misgendered her on accident, or like now that I know she's trans, I hope I don't start misgendering her, which is like weird thing to, like, I don't know if you should say that, girl. And so I just kind of hated that it was treated as a reveal and that Serena reacted so like over the top. Like it made it feel, it wasn't a bad reaction, but it was so over the top that it made it feel othering and like fetishistic. Anyways, I'm probably making this book seem like worse than it really is. Like it's really not. It's a T. Kingfisher book. If you like her other stuff, you'll probably like this. I don't really like most of her other stuff, and yet she comes out with like 5 books a year, so I keep picking them up, and some of them I like more than others and some of them I don't like, and this was just one of the ones that was just a really middle of the road 3-star read for me. It was a quick read, but I'm just never gonna read it again or think of it again, really, now that I've ranted about it. I also read 2 like middle grade children's books this month because I was trying to come up with something for the fantasy bingo square that is middle grade. At first I read The Borrowers by Mary Norton. This is the book that inspired The Secret World of Arrietty, the Ghibli movie. That was one of the only Ghibli movies I watched as a child for some reason. I think it just came out at the perfect time, and like the English voice actors were Bridget Mendler and like the guy from Wizards of Waverly Place, and I loved both those shows on Disney, so I think like I made my mom like go see it, and I loved that movie as a kid. I loved it. I loved anything that involved like little people like living in like a big people world, and like using human objects in creative ways. And the book was interesting. It's very similar to the movie. There's a couple of differences. It's a lot more British, obviously, and then I don't know, I just feel like something about like the visual splendor of like seeing how the borrowers like repurpose human objects just works a lot better for me in visual format, like seeing it in a movie as opposed to just like reading it in a book. There were very cute illustrations in the edition I had, but as a whole I think I just prefer seeing it as a movie. I'm just more nostalgic for the movie. And then I also just didn't think this one was speculative to really fit the like spirit of the fantasy bingo square, so I read Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed because this just like was on the shelf in the kids section of the library and I grabbed it. And this was actually delightful. I actually really enjoyed this. It reminded me so much of like Gail Carson Levine, who I read a lot of as a child. Just this like very satirical take on a fairy tale, but like one that has a lot of meaning and like a lot of good messages for kids. The princess is really funny. She's always like using her brain to like get out of situations and like figure out what she needs to do. She's a very non-traditional princess. There's a lot of like fun fairy tale subversion in this, so I thought this was just delightful. I had a really good time with it. And again, if you're also looking for something for that square, I do recommend this one. I ended up reading like 2 books that were marketed to me as gay romance books that really ended up being more about like a coming of age story than anything else. Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth and The Open Era by Edward Schmidt. Sunburn is about this like Irish teenager who lives in like this very small town, and she becomes enamored with her female friend Susanna, and they sort of deal with liking each other but being in this very conservative Irish small town. It was interesting to see one of these like queer coming of age stories in which the main character was the closeted one and was the one that didn't want to come out and like tell the town about their relationship, and seeing it kind of from the other side, because I feel like a lot of the time in these like queer coming of age stories it's from the perspective of the person who wants to be out and is very like sure of themselves and like kind of has decided that they don't care if people respond badly, whereas Lucy in this book like knew her parents would respond badly and like really cared, and like when her mom did sort of find out, it like devastated her because her mom did start treating her differently. I just didn't feel that emotionally it hit for me. This is kind of like a situation with It Lasts Forever Then It's Over, where like I don't know what exactly it was about it, I just didn't entirely love it. I do think that maybe the stuff with the mom like wasn't entirely wrapped up in a way that I really appreciated, or the stuff with her friend Martin, I think is his name. Yeah, I just felt like it wrapped up in a way that I wasn't entirely, like the ending was just kind of meh for me, but it was certainly, again, if you like this kind of book, I think you will enjoy this one. It's a very unique one. And then The Open Era, a book about the first openly gay male tennis player who's competing in like the US Open, and a lot of it is also really more about his anxiety and him dealing with his mental health issues. He does sort of start to strike up a romance with the fellow player's sort of rival, Diego, and that is a portion of the book, but really again the book is really focused on him dealing with the pressure of being out and being like the first guy, and also dealing with his anxiety and panic attacks. And it's a fine book. I enjoyed it. I think I gave Sunburn 3.25 and The Open Era a 3. It just does one of my least favorite things in like a book focused on mental health, where the character goes to therapy multiple times in the book, and like we just see their therapy sessions as sort of like a shortcut to character development. Like they just talk to their therapist about all of these like hidden inner issues instead of showing us those hidden inner issues through the dialogue and through the actions they are taking. And then the therapist, says something and they're able to fix all those issues, or start to fix those issues and like come to a realization about themselves in a very, like for me it just feels like kind of a lazy way to not have to do that character development. Like you're just having them say it all in the therapy session. So I don't really love that, even though I did feel like the anxiety rep was very realistic and very relatable for me personally. And then I just felt like the end of the book, the last like 100 pages of the book, gets really heavy and like pretty dark, and it introduces all of these like personal conflicts for the main character, and then sort of U-turns back into like a fluffy rom-com ending that it didn't feel like it really earned at that point. Like, it still, there were all of these issues and all of these things, like his relationship with his coach and his relationship with Diego, and like all this stuff that just didn't really feel like was properly explored or wrapped up by the end. So I was just sort of left very unsatisfied by the ending of this book, not even because I wanted the romance to be a bigger part of it, because that really wasn't my complaint at all, but just because all of the other stuff really never felt like it got dealt with either. Back to rewatching Challengers for the 40th time. My only 5-star this month is actually a non-fiction book called There Is No Place for Us by Brian Goldstone. This is a book following 5 families in Atlanta who have lost their homes and are living practically on the streets. It's about the working homeless, so people who have jobs, full-time jobs in many cases, and still can't afford, you know, home shelter for themselves and their families in a major city. It was a really, really hard read, but also a really interesting read, and just I learned so much from it. But also there was that intensely human element because we were following each of these families. Each of the families were so well described and so well explored, and just the organization of having, you know, each of the families and going through their lives was so well done and made it like a just really seamlessly flowing book. It was just one of the best nonfiction books I think I've really read, just because of the way it was organized and structured, but also because of the information that was being delivered and how, like, you know, how much I just like was, obviously I knew it was bad, but getting into the nitty-gritty and like learning all of this stuff, especially about how like the programs that are meant to help people have all these conditions attached and like end up really being more harm than they help, was just so, again, really hard, impactful read, but such a worthwhile read. And I do really recommend this one if you've ever been interested in reading about like the state of housing in America. I also read To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This is the first like full-length novel I've read from her. I read her little, no it's not, I read Orlando, that's totally a lie, ignore me. I read Orlando from Virginia Woolf, which I really enjoyed, but that one's like really weird. That one's like a novel about a character who swaps back and forth from male and female. So I always knew that one was gonna be up my alley. And then I also read her little like essay, A Room of One's Own, which I also really enjoyed, but I was like, let me get into like a purely like, you know, classic novel from her that doesn't have that sort of weirdo aspect of like the gender swapping. Let's see how I feel about it. And I ended up really enjoying this. Just, it reminded me, they were contemporaries and they like had insane beef, so this makes sense, but it reminded me a lot of James Joyce and sort of the focus on the like mundanity and like triteness of everyday life, but also of like how beautiful everyday life can be, and of the relationships between people and how beautiful they can be, but from this very feminine point of view. It's about this woman, Mrs. Ramsey, and her life and her domestic struggles and life with her kids and her husband, and that was just so interesting to see. And I just really love the writing style. It just, every time it would start to get like too much and too stream of consciousness, it would pull back on itself and like go back to reality for a little bit, which I really enjoyed. It helped me a lot. So just beautiful prose, and I really again liked the story, so I gave that a 4.5. Then I also read and really enjoyed In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, which I gave a 4.25. This is basically Brideshead Revisited if they fought in World War One. So I ate it up. I love Brideshead Revisited. I love the dynamic of like sensitive boy who is like very charming and everyone loves him, and like the stoic buttoned up guy who is obsessed with him. Yeah, sue me, I love that dynamic. So that was what the dynamic between the two boys in this book reminded me a lot of, and it's about them being together at boarding school and like having feelings for each other but not knowing the other person does, and like not wanting to ruin their friendship, and then going to the front, going to fight in the war, and sort of realizing how much they love each other, but just it's always too late. And there's this like, they get ripped apart for a large portion of the book, and there's literally a part of the book like 20% of the way through where I had to like start skimming and like see if this character came back into play somehow, because I was like, if he just straight up died, I'm throwing this book out the window. And I you know, I don't want to say anything, but I didn't throw the book out the window, so it's okay. But just, yeah, I felt like the commentary on war and about pacifism, but yeah, I just found the commentary on war and violence really meaningful, and just like the classism especially that was they were dealing with at the front, and the kind of human cost of the war, and how even the people who made it out like were just not ever the same, and just like how they came back together, and it is sort of like a bittersweet happy ending for them, but they were just so changed by their experiences that it's just not going to be what you want it to be, and not going to be like the happy triumphant reunion that you really want it to be. But it feels so realistic. It wouldn't have felt realistic for me, it wouldn't have felt earned if they had just come back together and everything had gone back to how it was when they were like 17-year-old naive schoolboys. Like I appreciated that it took this very realistic track of being like, we're together again, but like we're both kind of so scarred by our experiences that it's going to be difficult, and I'm gonna, you know, react and act in ways that seem extremely rude and hostile, because PTSD can make you hostile and make you like not a pleasant person to be around, and that's realistic, and that's something that, I don't know, I can see like somebody coming away from this book and being like, oh, he was so mean at the end, and like it was such a, you know, sad ending. But I don't know, I felt like it was a very, very realistic bittersweet ending that like perfectly walked that line for me. So I did really enjoy that one. A book I didn't enjoy was The Bones Beneath My Skin by TJ Klune. I read this one for a book club. It's funny because I feel like with House in the Cerulean Sea, which is the only other TJ Klune book I've read, I thought the book was objectively well written. I didn't remember having a problem with the prose or the structure or the writing style at all. But I did have a problem ultimately afterwards with learning that he had taken really heavy inspiration from the 60s scoop, where Indigenous children were like stolen from their families and, you know, taken to these residential schools, prisons basically, where a lot of them were murdered. I just found that very distasteful, especially for a book in which the moral is sort of that like, you know, we can fix systemic discrimination by loving each other hard enough. Like I just had sort of a problem with that messaging and that inspiration, but I didn't think it was an objectively poorly written book. However, with The Bones Beneath My Skin, I liked the themes and I liked the character dynamic and the found family of it all a lot more, but I just felt like it was objectively quite a poorly written book. Like every couple of pages it would just revert back to this writing style where it would just be a bunch of single lines, each on their own indented like entered line. It would literally be like, she looked at me, I looked at her, he looked away, she looked back at him, they both sat in silence for like an entire page, and it just was like really bad. Like that's just really bad writing, and it just was so repetitive and like such a writing style that I just did not enjoy at all. So yeah, I don't think I'll be picking up more TJ Klune because I think I've just decided that he's just probably not an author for me. I also read There Is No Antimemetics Division by Quantum, and I thought this was fun, a very quick, fun read. Ultimately, I didn't love it for the same reasons I just don't love most SCP stories or SCP inspired stories. There's so much explaining. Like there is just this desire and need to categorize and explain everything. So much of this book is characters explaining things to each other, forgetting they've explained it, and then explaining a different thing. And I just don't really love that personally. It's just not really what it's part of the reason why I just don't really like SCP that much. I just don't like the explaining. I see a lot of people being like, I liked the first half where it was kind of just sort of loosely connected short stories, and I didn't like the second half, which gets into this more overarching like world shattering plot. And I kind of disagree. I liked the second half more, I think, because I'm not really an SCP person. I don't want to read short disconnected short stories just about like weird stuff happening. I want to read a story with an overarching plot, and I honestly think you're kind of not really paying attention close enough if you think the first half of this book is just unconnected short stories. Like they are all connected, you just don't really start seeing how they are connected until like halfway through the book. So I got to that point and I was really enjoying the recontextualization and how everything was sort of being interlinked and sort of the greater plot and moving the plot forward in an overarching narrative way. I just didn't really like the protagonist in the second half as much as I liked the protagonist in the first half, and then I also just didn't really like the ending. Like it's engaging with this really interesting idea, like how do you defeat an idea? It's to replace it with another idea, but the focus is on like the mathematics and the mechanics of like artificially amplifying an idea as opposed to like what the idea actually is and how you could have an idea take hold in so many people at once. Like that's just not what I personally would want from a story like this. But to be a story that I want, this book would have to be like 4 times the length. This book would have to be Exordia by Seth Dickinson, which this book, that's another reason I think why I just wasn't like blown away by this book. I think if this is like your first foray into this kind of story, it could be so cool and mind-blowing and unique to you. But I've read so many other books like this, Exordia, Annihilation, I've played the video game Control, like I've just seen this done in ways that I personally prefer a lot more in different ways. Like Exordia to me is like the perfect example of this kind of book, and that's the kind of book I love. and even Annihilation, and even, again, the video game Control, which is in itself very clearly like SCP inspired. But I find that more interesting because I'm the one doing it, you know, I'm exploring, I'm shooting stuff with my gun. And in this book, it just didn't really do it in a way I loved, and it would have had to be like 4 times the length to do it in a way I loved, so didn't love this. It didn't change my life. I didn't, you know, love it as much as I see other people loving it, but I did, again, think it was a very quick, fun read. I think if you like SCP Foundation stuff, again, you will probably really love this. So I went into it knowing I wasn't really the target audience for it, and I came out of it pleasantly surprised and liking it way more than I thought I would, so at least there's that. The last book I want to talk about is Excellent Women by Barbara Pym. This is another book I got from the library book sale and finally picked up this month, and I actually was so charmed by this. It's about this like spinster clergyman's daughter who lives alone, and this glamorous married couple moves into the apartment below her and like starts to kind of shake up her life, and it's very like slice of lifey, just like her going through her life. It's a very satirical novel about like British social norms. It reminded me a lot of E.M. Forster, but it also reminded me a lot of like Evelyn Waugh with like the intense religiosity of it all. But it also reminded me a lot of E.M. Forster with that commentary on British social structure that is intensely funny. Like, I am not like a British humor kind of person, but I laughed so much while reading this, and I thought it was so funny. There's just sort of this very understated humor to it of like the main character and the situation she gets herself in and the way she reacts to it and the things that she's saying to herself. I just found it hilarious. There's so many good quotes in this book. Most of them are about tea and the making and taking of tea, and how she doesn't want to be a person that just makes tea in response to everything, but she finds herself in that position anyways. And it's also deeply about, again, it's a English social satire novel deeply about women's place in English society and how women are taken advantage of, and how women, you know, try really to find their place in the world, especially without men, but at every turn are kind of forced back into that subservience to men. So really interesting, really funny. I'm really glad I finally read this after thinking that it kind of wouldn't be up my alley, but I did really enjoy it. Okay, I'm finally done now, and I am going to show off the 2 books that I bought during the Library of America sale. They were doing a sale on like duologies or on like multiple volume collections, and I got really hyped because I knew that The Future is Female is a dual volume collection, and I read the first one, which is female-oriented sci-fi up to the 70s. I read this one for an undergrad class and I loved it, and then I went and read the second volume by myself just for the short story square on Fantasy Bingo last year, and I really loved a lot of the stories in here too. And this is in volume 2, the 1970s. I love both these books. I think they're so cute and so well designed. I got them for like $20, and so I'm very happy with these. Don't ask me where I'm gonna put them. Do not ask me where I'm gonna put them because I have no idea, but I'm really happy to have them, and happy that now I can probably like reread a lot of the stories in here that I loved. I saw on the back warning, the visionary women writers in this landmark anthology may permanently alter your perception of American science fiction. That's true. That's true, they might. Wow, I talked for a really long time this month, and yeah, like I said, about halfway through the month I just stopped picking up as much sci-fi and fantasy. I've been in such a slump with it, I guess, where I was just picking up stuff that either I was really excited for and it ended up disappointing me, or I was picking up stuff that like I knew would just be a quick, fast, but mediocre read, and it turned out it was quick and fast and mediocre. So I'm trying to read more deliberately now and kind of go back to the drawing board and read a lot more classics and a lot more non-fantasy stuff, so that when I do pick up fantasy, it's just stuff that I'm really excited about and stuff that I think I'm gonna really enjoy. And that has been working well for me so far. I'm like 40% of the way into Dahlgren by Samuel Zeleny and really enjoying it. I can't wait to talk about it next month. And I'm so excited. The Ursula K. Le Guin Prize for Fiction shortlist for 2026 finally got released, like on like the last day of June, right after I had made my video where I complained in it about how the list wasn't out yet. So I'm psychic. I'm so happy to see Works of Urban on there. I can't wait to reread it when I'm doing like my reading of the shortlist. I'm definitely going to do that again this year because I had such a good time doing it last year. I've heard really good things about Slow Gods by Claire North. I've also heard really good things about Mad Sisters of EC by Tashan Mehta. Ooh, the description: Susanna Clark's Piranesi meets Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. That's really interesting. And then I have read Notes on a Regicide. I liked it, but it's definitely second to Works of Urban for me. And then what else have I heard about? And then also Call and Response by Christopher Caldwell. That's his name, right? Did get nominated, so I'm really excited to read that short story collection. I bought a copy from Neon Hemlock because I love them and want to support them. Anyways, I'm really excited to read all of those, and the other ones also look very interesting. So very happy to see that shortlist out finally. Very excited to read it and make a video on it and write a piece about it, so that's gonna be really fun. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Have you read any of the books that I read this month? And if so, what did you think? What have you been reading in June? What are you excited to read in July? And I will see you in the next one. Bye.